what is going on? She's just deleted her Twitter. She's getting called out because it was exposed, because an interview got brought up. Something's gone weirdly wrong. Like, we hired a freaking chronically online GM.
What just happened wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a bad day on social media. What you saw was the complete collapse of authority, live, in real time. An executive who once controlled an entire franchise just vanished from the digital world, not because of random trolls, but because she was outplayed by the fans. Yes, you heard that right. This wasn't a meltdown, it was a takedown. A move so coordinated, so precise, that it forced one of the highest-ranking voices in women's basketball into digital hiding within hours. And the scariest part? This wasn't even spontaneous. It was calculated. 9 months of silence until the perfect moment struck. But here's where it gets bigger. This wasn't just about one executive or one viral clip. This was the first sign of something far more dangerous to traditional sports power. A fan-driven intelligence network, organized, relentless, and armed with influence, proving it can rewrite the rules of professional sports. In the next few minutes, I'll show you the timeline that exposes this accident for what it really was, a carefully executed coup. Then we'll uncover the hidden networks that pulled the strings. And finally, why every single league executive should be terrified of what comes next. Because after this, no one in sports authority is untouchable anymore.
We want to sustain the growth and the interest level in the franchise. I mean, this is about the Indiana Fever. Yes, we have a foundational player in Caitlin Clark and Leah Boston, and we're going to continue to add to that. But I want this team to be the leader in the country, and a brand, an enduring brand, like Apple or something. I mean, we have a real opportunity here. So.
On the surface, it looked like a coincidence. An old interview clip resurfaced, people got mad, and within hours, the Indiana Fever president vanished from Twitter. Simple, right? Wrong. Because the timing of this so-called meltdown is what changes everything. Let's rewind. Back in October, Kelly Kroskoff made what seemed like an innocent comparison, saying she wanted the Fever to become an enduring brand like Apple. At the time, nobody cared. The comment barely registered outside of a few local circles. But here's the twist. 9 months later, in July, that exact quote explodes across social media, sparking outrage and forcing Kroskoff into digital retreat almost overnight. Ask yourself, why then? Why did a harmless metaphor suddenly catch fire almost a year later? It wasn't random, it was timed. And the timing lines up with 3 critical events. First, Sophie Cunningham's podcast was gaining traction and fueling Clark protection narratives online. Second, tensions inside the Fever organization were already leaking into fan communities. And third, Caitlin Clark's fan base had reached peak momentum, ready to weaponize anything that looked like disrespect. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a trigger pulled at the exact right moment, when fans knew it would hit hardest. And once the clip went viral, the chain reaction was instant. Twitter threads, TikTok edits, Reddit discussions, all synchronized like clockwork. Within 12 hours, the pressure was unbearable. Kroskoff didn't just delete her account out of embarrassment, she was pushed out. And here's why that matters. When you realize the timeline wasn't random, you realize this wasn't outrage, it was strategy. And the real story begins with who orchestrated it. The Apple comment by itself wasn't dangerous. Executives make clumsy metaphors all the time and they disappear in the noise. But this one didn't vanish. It became ammunition. And ammunition only matters when someone knows how to fire it.
That's exactly what Caitlin Clark's fan networks did. They didn't just stumble across this old interview. They archived it, studied it, and held on to it until the exact moment it would have the most impact. When tensions inside the Fever reached a boiling point, the Apple line became the perfect symbol. A front office that cared more about branding than protecting its superstar. And once that framing hit social media, the quote wasn't just a quote anymore. It was transformed into a rallying cry. TikTok edits compared Clark to Steve Jobs, the visionary every brand depends on. Twitter threads framed the Fever's leadership as clueless managers obsessed with logos instead of players. Reddit communities dissected every word, painting it as proof that the franchise didn't respect its foundation. Here's the part most people miss. This wasn't fandom. This was weaponization. Fans turned a harmless soundbite into a loaded message that spread across platforms with surgical precision. They knew the Apple comparison could be twisted into management sees Clark as a product, not a person. That framing was too powerful to ignore, and within hours it dominated the conversation. The fallout wasn't about one bad metaphor. It was about organized voices taking a small spark and deliberately turning it into a wildfire. And the result? The first documented case in professional sports where fan networks forced a high-ranking executive into complete digital retreat. But the Apple quote was just the trigger. What made the blast so effective was the infrastructure behind it. The influence networks built long before this controversy ever surfaced. And that's where the story gets even more revealing. For years, fans were treated like background noise. Cheering, booing, maybe trending a hashtag if something went wrong. Teams could ignore it, media could filter it, and executives could brush it off as passion. But what happened here destroyed that old model. This wasn't noise, it was infrastructure. Caitlin Clark's supporters didn't just complain louder than everyone else. They built systems, Reddit hubs that tracked every misstep, TikTok channels archiving every foul that went uncalled, Twitter networks designed to amplify protective narratives within seconds. What used to be scattered outrage is now organized intelligence. And here's the breakthrough. Those networks don't just react, they strategize. They gather information, they coordinate timing, and they apply pressure in waves until their target breaks. That's not fandom anymore. That's institutional power. The kind of power that once belonged only to leagues, executives, or legacy media. The Apple controversy proved it. In less than 12 hours, a group of unpaid, unorganized fans forced a professional executive into retreat. That's faster than any newspaper investigation, faster than any board meeting, and faster than any league press release. It wasn't ESPN or the WNBA front office that held authority. It was the fans. And here's why every executive should be terrified. Once fans realize they can make an institution fold, they'll never go back to being silent spectators. The balance of power just shifted. Permanently. But this wasn't just an abstract movement. It was a coordinated strike, carried out step by step like a playbook. And when you trace how it unfolded, you see just how advanced these networks have become.
Here's how it went down. On July 12th, the Apple clip quietly resurfaced online. Within minutes, it wasn't quiet anymore. Influence nodes, the fan accounts with the biggest reach, began posting the video with the exact same framing. Management cares more about branding than protecting Caitlin Clark. That single idea became the spark. From there, the operation unfolded like clockwork. Twitter threads broke down the Apple metaphor line by line, painting it as proof of executive incompetence. TikTok edits dramatized it, pulling in millions of views by comparing Clark to visionaries like Steve Jobs. Reddit communities dissected the clip and circulated receipts of every organizational failure leading up to it. The messaging was different on each platform, but the theme was the same. Leadership was failing its star. And the timing wasn't accidental. This explosion happened the same week Sophie Cunningham's podcast was fueling Clark protection narratives, and the Fever's internal dysfunction was already a hot topic. The networks didn't just find the moment, they waited for it. Then, when the environment was primed, they pulled the trigger. The results were staggering. One viral tweet, enduring brands embrace their visionaries. Apple had Steve, the Fever has Caitlin Clark. Racked up over 50,000 retweets in less than 24 hours. That wasn't random virality.
That was synchronized amplification. Different accounts, different platforms, all driving the same story at the same time. And the target? She folded almost instantly. Kelly Kroskoff's digital retreat wasn't about embarrassment, it was about pressure. A wave so coordinated, so relentless, that it boxed her in with no way out. What we just witnessed wasn't a social media firestorm. It was the first full-scale demonstration of fan-driven tactical warfare in professional sports. And if you think this was a one-off, wait until you see how the players themselves are learning to weaponize this same system for their own gain. While fans were proving they could take down executives, Sophie Cunningham was quietly building a playbook of her own, and it's one that flips the entire economic logic of professional sports. Here's how it works. In 2025 alone, Sophie racked up over $2,000 in WNBA fines for excessive physicality and public comments the league didn't like. Normally, fines are meant to hurt players, to keep them quiet, to control behavior. But with Sophie, the opposite happened. Every fine made her bigger. Every punishment drove more attention, more loyalty, and more sales. The proof? After one of her most controversial incidents, stepping in to defend Caitlin Clark on the court, her jersey sold out in under 48 hours. Her podcast downloads spiked. Clips of her fiery defense went viral, fueling a narrative that she was the protector the league refused to provide. The math is simple. For every dollar lost to fines, she gained multiples back in influence and revenue. This is what I call martyrdom economics. The more the league punishes her, the more valuable she becomes. Fines turn into marketing. Controversy turns into currency. And Sophie isn't just letting it happen, she's leaning into it. But here's the genius. Her podcast isn't just entertainment. It's intelligence. Sophie uses it to call out referees, expose organizational failures, and reinforce the narrative that Clark and her teammates aren't being protected. That content doesn't disappear into thin air. It circulates through the very same fan networks that took down Kroskoff. And those networks weaponize her words, turning frustration into coordinated campaigns. In other words, Sophie provides the spark. The fans provide the fire. Together, they create a feedback loop that transforms league punishment into exponential market value.
And if you think that's accidental, you're underestimating how strategic this has become. Sophie isn't just defending her teammate. She's rewriting the rules of player empowerment and proving that a single athlete, backed by organized fans, can generate more leverage than an entire front office. But the wild part is what happens next. This model isn't staying with Sophie. Other players are already watching, learning, and preparing to replicate the formula, which means the league isn't facing just one Sophie. They're about to face an entire generation of them. What makes this moment different from any sports controversy before it is the partnership forming between the players and the fans. It isn't official, it isn't written down anywhere, but it's powerful enough to shake entire organizations. Sophie Cunningham is at the center of it. Every time she speaks out on her podcast, every time she calls out referees or organizational failures, she's not just venting, she's supplying raw intelligence. And the fan networks are listening. They clip it, share it, and fold it into their campaigns. Her words become ammunition, and the fans know exactly how to use it. In return, the fans amplify her influence. They turn her fines into proof that she's being silenced. They boost her jersey sales, spread her podcast, and elevate her as the voice willing to say what the league won't. The more she risks, the more they reward her. And the cycle keeps spinning. That's the symbiosis. Sophie gives them a cause, they give her power. Together, they create pressure that no executive meeting or PR strategy can contain. Because this isn't just one player or one fan base anymore. It's a self-reinforcing system. Each punishment fuels Sophie's platform. Each word she speaks fuels the fans' campaigns. And each fan campaign amplifies the punishment all over again. It's a closed loop of influence. And once you see it, you realize why this is so dangerous to the old order of sports authority. The league can find Sophie, silence executives, and try to control the message. But every action they take only strengthens the very forces they're trying to suppress. This isn't fandom as we used to know it. It's mutual leverage. A player and her fans locked together, turning backlash into influence and influence into power. And that power isn't staying contained in Indiana. It's spreading across the league. And soon, every executive will be forced to confront the same question. What happens when the fans and the players realize they don't need the league at all? For years, the WNBA tried to control its narrative from the top down. Executives set the tone, PR teams shaped the headlines, and players were expected to stick to basketball. But that model is collapsing in real time. The Sophie Clark saga has proven that the real power no longer sits in boardrooms. It sits with the players and the fans who are willing to move in unison. That's not just disruptive, it's destabilizing. Because once the balance of power shifts, the league has no clean way to wrestle it back. Think about it. If every fine against Sophie turns into more influence, then punishment isn't a deterrent anymore. It's fuel. If every executive who challenges the fan base gets flooded with targeted campaigns, then authority doesn't look strong, it looks fragile. And if every player realizes that controversy can be converted into revenue and leverage, then the league's control mechanisms stop working entirely.
What we're seeing is a parallel system of legitimacy. The league says one thing, but the fans and players validate something else. The official narrative loses weight. The unofficial one takes over. And when that happens, an organization as centralized as the WNBA faces an identity crisis it was never prepared for. And here's the dangerous part. This isn't contained to one moment, one season, or even one superstar. Other players are watching Sophie. Other fan bases are studying Clark Nation. They see the blueprint. Take a fine, spin it into content, let the fans amplify it, and watch your influence grow. What was once an isolated rebellion is on the verge of becoming a league-wide strategy. That means the WNBA isn't just battling a controversy, it's battling a new operating system for player power. And unless the league finds a way to adapt fast, its old playbook of discipline and control will be useless. But there's still one question left hanging in the air. If the fans and players now hold the power, what happens to the league itself? What we're witnessing isn't just a fight over fines or one player standing up to the league. It's a transfer of power, a shift so profound that the WNBA may never go back to the way it was. For decades, leagues have survived on hierarchy. Executives set the rules, referees enforced them, and players were expected to operate within boundaries. But Sophie Cunningham's defiance and the fan machine behind her has cracked that system wide open. Now, every decision the league makes is immediately challenged, dissected, and weaponized in real time. The authority that once looked untouchable suddenly looks vulnerable. And here's the truth the WNBA doesn't want to admit. The fans have outgrown the league. They don't just consume the product anymore, they shape it, amplify it, and even police it. When Cunningham calls out corruption, the fans turn it into a movement. When Caitlin Clark gets targeted, the fans mobilize to defend her. It's not passive entertainment, it's active participation. That's the power shift. The league no longer owns the story, the players and their fans do. And the more the WNBA tries to resist, the faster the resistance grows. Each attempt at discipline looks like suppression, each punishment looks like proof, and each lesson only strengthens the opposition. So where does that leave the WNBA? At a crossroads. One path tries to drag things back to the old system of top-down control, a strategy doomed to fail. The other embraces the new reality, a partnership model where players and fans share influence, and the league adapts instead of suppressing. But make no mistake, the shift has already begun. Sophie Cunningham has shown the blueprint, and Clark Nation has proven the model. The center of gravity has moved, and the league's survival depends on how quickly it recognizes that the future isn't controlled from above anymore. It's shaped from the ground up. By the players, by the fans, and by a new power that can't be silenced.
Power struggles in sports always come down to one thing: money. And that's exactly where this conflict is heading. The Sophie Clark saga isn't just a culture war, it's becoming an economic war, one that threatens the WNBA's financial stability. Fans aren't just arguing online anymore, they're channeling their anger into coordinated spending and boycotts.
Think about what we've already seen. Merchandise spikes whenever a player is fined or disciplined. Sophie's defiance has literally turned into a brand. Every punishment handed down by the league becomes a rallying cry that sells more shirts, hats, and hashtags. That's not rebellion, that's revenue. But it cuts the other way too. Fans are starting to pull back from official WNBA channels, skipping broadcasts and funneling their attention into independent creators who tell the story their way. That means advertisers see lower engagement, sponsors feel the backlash, and suddenly the league's most powerful weapon, its corporate partnerships, starts to wobble. And here's the most dangerous part. The fans know it. They've realized that their wallets are louder than any protest sign. Every canceled subscription, every skipped ticket purchase, every dollar redirected to a player-driven campaign is another shot fired in this economic war. The WNBA isn't just battling bad press anymore, it's fighting for its bottom line. This is where the league's old strategies collapse. You can fine a player, you can silence a quote, but you can't control millions of fans deciding where to spend their money. That's leverage executives can't ignore. And once that leverage is weaponized, the balance of power doesn't just shift, it flips. Because when the economy of the game is driven by the people instead of the league, control stops flowing downward, it flows upward, straight into the hands of players and the communities that back them. And the question hanging over all of this is chilling. If the fans can now hurt the WNBA's wallet, how long before they reshape the league itself? So where does all of this lead? If history has taught us anything, it's that moments like these don't just fade away. They set the stage for even bigger clashes. The first prediction is simple. The league will double down on control. Expect tighter regulations, harsher fines, and maybe even back-channel pressure on media outlets to cool off the coverage. But here's the catch. Every attempt at control risks backfiring because fans have already tasted what it feels like to push back and win. Second, we're likely to see players forming unofficial alliances, quiet phone calls, private group chats, maybe even coordinated messaging across different teams. If the league won't protect them, they'll start protecting each other. And that unity could become the most powerful weapon yet. Third, the economic battle isn't stopping. Fans have shown they'll boycott, they'll fund player-driven campaigns, and they'll funnel their energy in the independent platforms. That pressure will only grow, forcing sponsors and networks to decide whose side they're really on, the league office or the people paying the bills. And finally, the biggest prediction of all. This isn't just about Sophie Cunningham or Caitlin Clark anymore. This is about the future of the WNBA itself. If the league adapts, it could evolve into something stronger than ever, a model where players and fans actually share the power. But if it resists, then the conflict we're seeing now may just be the beginning of a full-on identity crisis that shakes the foundation of women's basketball. Because when power shifts, it never shifts back quietly. And the question everyone should be asking is, what happens when the fans realize they've become the league's most powerful owners? At the end of the day, what started as a single incident with Sophie Cunningham has spiraled into something much bigger, a movement reshaping the balance of power in women's basketball. The timeline looked suspicious, the quotes were weaponized, and the league tried to reassert control. But instead of silencing the noise, every move only amplified it. Now, fans and players are no longer just participants in the system. They're rewriting it. The power is shifting, the economics are tilting, and the league's old methods are crumbling right in front of us. Whether you see Sophie Cunningham as a rebel, a hero, or just a symbol of something larger, one thing is undeniable. The WNBA is standing at a crossroads. The next few months will decide whether this league evolves into a true partnership between its players and fans, or whether it risks losing the very people who made it matter in the first place. But here's where I want to hear from you. Do you think this power shift is unstoppable, or will the league eventually find a way to wrestle back control? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because honestly, this conversation is just getting started. And if you've been following the saga this far, you already know, the story isn't over. Subscribe for the next chapter because the most shocking twists may not have even happened yet.